Noswaith dda I bawb, good evening everyone, a croeso cynnes iawn I chi gyd I ddarlith Nadolig y Comisiwn ar noson Ffair Nadolig y Llyfrgell Genedlaethol. Gyda phopeth yn rhithiol eleni, dydy ddim cweit yr un peth. Ni wedi colli cael mwynhau cinio Nadolig a mince pei yng Nghaffi Pen Dinas heddiw a bod yn rhan o fwrlwm a chyffro'r ffair. Ond drwy'n sicr bydd cynnwys y sgwrs eleni rhy mor ddiddorol ac arfer chi. So a very warm welcome to you all to the Royal Commission's annual Christmas lecture, held again this year in collaboration with the National Library of Wales. This year's lecture, uncovering wall paintings, the patterned wall from modern to medieval Wales, will be given by our very own Richard Suggett. For those of you who have joined us on Zoom, you'll be more than welcome to ask any questions. Please write your questions in the question and answer function or in chat, and Richard will answer your questions at the end. This talk has been recorded tonight in order for us to share it on other platforms as well. For those listening on other platforms such as Facebook, you're more than welcome to send us any questions or share your comments, and Richard will reply to them as soon as possible. Bod y sgwrs yn Saesneg heno, cofiwch bod croeso I gysylltu ni yn y Gymraeg os am adael sylw neu ofyn cwestiwn. Felly hoffwn ni nawr gael cyflwyno I siaradwr I ni heno, sef Richard Suggett. Mae nifer o gyfeillion y Comisiwn yn gyfarwydd iawn â Richard, ein arbenigwr ar adeiladau hanesyddol. Mae'n awdur arbennig, yn siaradwr poblogaidd ac yn aml ar y teledu hefyd. Cafodd Richard y fraint o gydweithio gyda'r diweddar Peter Smith, a fo ddysgol sut I ddarllen adeiladau, profiad arbennig I unrhyw hanesydd pensaernïol. Dros y blynyddoedd, mae Richard wedi bod yn rhan o ac wedi arwain sawl un o brosiectau'r Comisiwn, gan gynnwys arolygon o 2 pren Sir Faesyfed a 2 cerrig yn Eryri. Fe hefyd fydd gyfrifol am datblygu rhaglen dendrochronoleg lwyddiannus iawn yma yng Nghymru. A dros y misoedd diwetha, bu'n gweithio ar gofnodion murluniau y Comisiwn, sef testun ei ddarlith heno. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Richard Suggett. He's an architectural historian with the Royal Commission and is one of our most popular speakers and authors. Richard had the good fortune to work with the late, great Peter Smith, who taught him how to read buildings. Over the years, Richard has been involved in many of the Commission's projects, including surveys of timber houses in Dratonshire and stone houses in Snowdonia, as well as developing a successful programme of scientific dating of buildings in Wales, working with laboratories in Oxford and Swansea. His current, over lockdown project has been an assessment of the Commission's record of wall paintings in Wales, the subject of this evening's Christmas lecture. Felly ar hynny eiriau, drosodd ata chi, Richard. Diolch.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Angharad. Well, thank you, Angharad, and greetings to everyone, especially the friends of the Commission. It's a great pleasure for me to give this Christmas lecture and something of an indulgence too, because I have been working on wall paintings recently. The lecture is on Zoom, of course, and for very good reasons. One of the unintended consequences of Zoom really is that we can see into other people's rooms, and you know, from Cardiff to Cairo, I've been amazed really at the neutral walls of so many speakers and interviewees. For our ancestors who lived in a world of colour and design, this would be almost incomprehensible, I think. And for them, if they knew the word, I think they would think that in the 2020s we were suffering from an extreme case of chromophobia, that is, aversion to colour. So in this lecture, I'm going to give a kind of partial history of the patterned wall from modern to medieval Wales. So we'll be going back through time and from houses to churches. It is, at least initially, relatively light-hearted. It is, after all, the Christmas lecture, but I will be making some important points along the way. So, where do we start? If we can start the images. You'll have to bear with me while.
Move the mouse slightly to the right, Richard.
Okay.
It should work.
Ah, yes, it's working now. Good. Okay. So yes, just one of the sort of consequences of Zoom. I'm going to talk to the images just as if I was talking in the drum or some other public venue. There'll be a lot of images, and yeah, I hope it will be interesting and maybe a bit provocative. So where to start? I've chosen to start at the moment of discovery. This is at Nantios, the 18th century mansion a little south of Aberystwyth. An architect has just pulled away a piece of plaster that was coming away, a piece of plaster on a Hessian background, on a Hessian backing, and revealed the pattern wall. It's a pattern of stenciled shamrocks, rather silvery shamrocks. So at the moment of discovery, there are a whole series of conflicting emotions. There is, of course, the thrill of discovery. And then there's the realization that if you're going to expose this patterned wall, then the conservation costs are going to be enormous. And then thirdly, there's a growing realization that you don't actually like this patterned wall. It is, after all, silvery shamrocks. So soon enough, it just gets covered over again. So I think we have really fallen out of love with the patterned wall, and it's difficult to know exactly when this occurred, but I think it occurred somewhere in the 1970s, say, when I was at school, growing up in Penarth. Everyone, more or less, had a front room, and this was the successor to the historic parlour into which you introduced distinguished visitors, and the front room was dominated by the patterned wall. In particular, it was dominated by garish wallpaper like this, which we would find absolutely hideous today. And in fact, estate agents today sometimes advise clients, if they want a quick sale, to remove any wallpaper like this, such as the aversion to it. Pre-COVID, I just did a little bit of research, not really real research, but just going round to the local paint shop, just out of curiosity to see if they sold any wallpaper. And at the paint shop, now renamed the Decor Centre, they told me that wallpaper sales, patterned wallpaper sales, had absolutely plummeted. And with it had gone the whole paraphernalia of wallpaper paste, long-bladed scissors, special tables, and of course the experts who could hang wallpaper and get the joins between the rolls absolutely right. So wallpaper sales had plummeted, but paint sales had actually rocketed. But these weren't the coloured paints. These were generally off-whites and neutral colours, with names like straw, matchstick, dove, and my absolute favourite, timid white. So how are we to account for this shift in taste? It is quite difficult, especially as we're so near to it, but and I'm trying to choose my words carefully. I think it's partly due to the attitude of architects who, influenced by the modernist movement, don't really want to see the clean lines of their architecture sort of disguised by colour, by design, and by clutter. So this is a modernist interior. You can see it's kind of bleached of colour, except for a contrast with the black. It's also free of clutter and free of any pattern whatsoever. It's a very nice room, but of course, if you want to live in a modernist house, I think you have to have a room out of sight, filled with comfortable clutter. Another dimension of the modernist movement really is the idea of intervisibility, the idea, just as we have on Zoom, that we can look out as well as look in. And so I've just chosen this picture because it appears to be a house without curtains, so intervisibility very strong here. I suspect, of course, it has blinds, but it doesn't have curtains. And I just make this point because curtains are really the last vestige of the patterned wall. And I take this opportunity to congratulate Angharad on her curtains, which I noticed as the backdrop behind her. So where do you find the patterned wall these days, the historic patterned wall? I have to say that it's not really very easy. Very often the patterned wall has been scrubbed clean, and you can only find it in inaccessible places, particularly in roof spaces. So this image, a fragment of patterned wall in a rather large Flintshire house. It's in the roof space, and it's worth describing. So it's really a sort of attenuated leaf trail, and you can see black tendrils painted in freehand on a white background. It has a border, red border with white cabling, and it's busy, it's effective, and it's colourful. And it was actually probably painted in the knowledge that it would be superseded eventually. However, the point is that it once covered the whole roof. You can see traces of it to the right of the pattern. It covered the whole roof and probably the walls as well. So we mostly get fragments of the patterned wall surviving, but occasionally we do get large sections of the patterned wall, and they are extremely impressive. This is Cyliau, the wonderfully preserved 16th century house in Radnorshire. If you go inside, facing you at the end of the historic hall is the principal partition. When the plaster of the partition was taken off, this was revealed. It's the principal partition. It's got a very sophisticated painting on it. There's a black ground, and the pattern is rather a complicated leaf and flower trail in browns and reds and greens, and the leaves are beautifully curved as well. And in the flickering light of the fire and the candle as well, these leaves would have appeared to move and dance. And within the foliage, there are various animals, including this collared hunting dog. And this painted screen formed the backdrop to the high table at the end of the hall. We know this because there are various drawings of similar arrangements. This is a famous drawing from the Luttrell Psalter, and it shows Sir Geoffrey Luttrell with the famously glum expression dining at the high table, but with the backdrop of the tapestry behind him. So the tapestry at Kiliai is really imitating a tapestry. It's a fictive tapestry. And this is really one of the first lessons about the painted wall. Very often, the painted wall is imitating a design in another medium. This is particularly true in the 18th century, when the patterned wall often imitated printed wallpapers. Wallpapers were expensive because they were taxed, and the painted wallpaper, the imitation wallpaper, was a convenient way of buying fashionable design cheaply and getting the borders right. This is an example from a Carmarthenshire house called Bydd, and it's a fashionable blue and white pattern, very much like the stenciled curling leaf pattern, but I particularly like the border in dark blue. Here you can see a sinuous trail of oak leaves and acorns. So a very nice and rather superior painting. But in a lesser chamber, there was a less fashionable painted wallpaper, and but still it's rather nice. Here we can see a pattern of orange painted stars, and then a border of darker moons, which you can see around the foot of the roof truss. So the painted wall the designs of the painted wall tended to imitate designs in other media, like fabrics and like wallpaper. And in the late 18th century and early 19th century, there were some extremely sophisticated painters who could imitate stonework. And this is a painted panel from Rheola in the Vale of Neath. And Rheola was the house designed by John Nash for his cousin John Edwards, and it's a house where no expense was spared. So this is a sophisticated painting, wall painting, which almost miraculously survived. But when I saw it, this is how I saw it in about 1996. When I saw it, they'd allowed an electrician to chase some cabling in for an electric light. This was rather ominous. And then when I next saw it a few years later, the painting had gone completely. Now, it's sort of obvious that the further you go back in time, the rarer wall paintings become. There are, a fair few examples of painted wallpaper, but very few painted tapestry. And where, you may ask, can you find that rarest of rare things, the painted medieval wall? Well, the answer is in churches, and I'm now really going to shift the focus from houses to churches. And you can find wall paintings in churches, particularly those churches, in the famous phrase, in those churches that the Victorians forgot. That is, those churches that weren't radically restored by the Victorians, and especially didn't have their walls scraped. This is Llandeilo, some miles north of Bala, not far from the Rheg Estate Farm Shop. This isn't an advert for the Rheg Estate Farm Shop, it's just that if you stop there, take the time to visit Llandeilo. It's such an instructive church. I particularly like this image, which shows its situation and how it rather resembles, like many churches did, how it rather resembles a late medieval house. So you have the late medieval sloping siding medieval house, and you have the doorway in the lower end of the house and windows which kind of resemble the outer room, the hall, and the inner room of a medieval house. Llandeilo Church was abandoned for regular use in the 1850s when a new church at Cynwyd was opened. It was kept ticking over for occasional services, and there are one or two remarkable photographs which show its unaltered Georgian interior. So here we can see the box pews, the little railed altar table, just railed in on three sides in 17th century fashion. But most remarkable of all, everything is plastered, including the roof, and the interior is kind of within a plastered carapace. The church ticked over throughout the second half of the 19th century into the 20th century, but by the 60s and early 70s, it had become badly dilapidated. And this photograph shows the interior heavily propped to prevent various collapses. This church seemed doomed, but then a kind of mini miracle happened. The newly formed Department of Environment stepped in and decided to take the church into guardianship and to restore the interior. So this is the restored interior. You can see that the box pews are still retained. The plaster ceilings have been taken down. You can see the medieval roof, and you can see the canopy of honour over the chancel. The Department of the Environment also removed several layers of lime wash from the walls and exposed wall paintings of different periods that once covered the walls. And here you see the sort of sandwich that they uncovered. So there are several phases of wall painting here. On the top, there's an arch-headed 18th century frame which contains an inscription, and that overlies a late medieval frame which contained various paintings. And here in Jane Durrant's reconstruction drawing, you can see how the framed medieval painting dominated the interior of the nave. It's rather puzzling painting, in fact. It's a set piece painting, but rather puzzling. It contains 7 compartments at the top, 7 compartments at the bottom. The compartments are filled with animals, some being written by figures, and it's been plausibly interpreted as representations of the 7 deadly sins and the 7 works of mercy, where each sin and each work of mercy is represented by an animal, rather like we today associate pigs with gluttony. But the main thing is here, the interior was dominated by this set piece painting. There are a surprising number, really, of set piece paintings, medieval wall paintings in Wales, including a couple of St. Christopher's, and we'll see it in a minute, and the Sunday Christ. This is the St. Christopher at Llanynys in Denbighshire. It's enormous. It covers a huge expanse of the north wall, visible as you come into the church. It depicts St. Christopher wading across the river, carrying the Christ child. And the painter has just caught that moment when the child is getting heavier and heavier because he's carrying the sins of the world represented by the orb that he's carrying. I should say that today St. Christopher is thought of as the patron saint of travellers, whereas in the medieval period he was thought more as a saint who could avert sudden death. Of course, travel and sudden death were interlinked, and the idea was that just contemplating this painting was equivalent to a prayer to St. Christopher, and to aid contemplation. And this is a characteristic of so many late medieval wall paintings. To aid contemplation, there's plenty of detail designed to hook the interest, make you linger and look at the painting. And in particular, if you look at St. Christopher's feet in the river, they're surrounded by fish of different sorts, some of which you can identify. There's a porpoise, there's a lamprey, there's a swordfish, there's a ray. So plenty of detail designed to engage the interest of the viewer and to detain him and make him look at the painting. The same is true of a painting sometimes called the Christ of the Trades, or the Sunday Christ. That's another set piece painting that you find in churches in Wales and the south of England and a little bit on the continent. So this is in the parish church of Llangybbi or Llangybbi in Monmouthshire. You can see on the right how it is today, obscured by a later monument. This is a reconstruction of it on the left. And here you can see Christ clad only in a loincloth, surrounded by various implements, some of which are injuring him. And, you can see a horn, a glove, a saw, pincers, a rake, an iron cooking pot, all sorts of things. And these were again designed to engage the interest of the viewer. And the message of the painting really was this. This was Christ of unending passion. All those who worked on a Sunday, using all these implements, were still injuring Christ. And of course, the message was you should be worshipping rather than working on a Sunday. It is quite difficult to date these paintings, exactly. Although by and large they do belong to the later 15th century and early 14th century. But occasionally you do have an opportunity to date a painting almost precisely. And this is the church at Newton Nottage, St. John's, restored in 2005. And during the restoration, they came across this painting. I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but that's how it is. It actually depicts Saint Michael. You can see his face in the center of the screen, and his face seems to have a spike coming from it, but that is actually part of a halo, and he has wings. And although you can't really see it, he's actually holding a pair of scales in which to weigh the saved and the damned. This painting has got a splendid scattering of flowers. It's called powdering. They're stencil flowers, and they're right across the painting. And then it's surrounded by a border which also incorporates some of these flowers. And the important thing is that the border respects the roof truss above it. That is, it avoids it. So it just goes to the left of the roof truss as you see it on the screen. So this means really that the painting was painted after the roof was installed. And the Royal Commission has tree-ring dated this roof and established that the timber for the roof was felled in 1504. So we know that this painting was painted after 1504, really in the last phase of the late medieval church, and that really is probably true of very many of the paintings that we encounter. Up to now, we've been discussing set piece paintings, and by and large, these are the paintings that have survived. But in 1984, there was an opportunity to discover a whole range of paintings within a church. And this is the church of Llandeilo Tal-y-bont, and St. Tylo's is, or was sited on the banks of the River Lycha, on the Glamorgan side of the river, which divides Carmarthenshire from Glamorgan. It's at a river crossing, and here you can see the M4 crossing the Lycha, and beyond it, the modern settlement of Pontarddulais. So at the bottom right, above the motorway, you can see the farm of Llandeilo Fach, and just a bit beyond that, in this sort of curve of the river, there's the site of the medieval church of Llandeilo Tal-y-bont. The medieval church was, in a way, is another of these churches that the Victorians forgot. In the 1850s, a new church was built at Pontarddulais, and the old church, not exactly abandoned, but only used for occasional services. It was maintained, it was kept ticking over, and annually given a coat of lime wash, as this remarkable photograph shows, and the lime wash covered not only the church, but the walls of the churchyard itself. The church was kept ticking over until really the 1960s and 1970s. It became increasingly dilapidated in the 1970s, and then in 1984 there was a despicable theft. The slate roof was stolen, and after that the church was doomed, really. And here you can see the interior of the church. Rain poured in, and the plaster came away in sheets, exposing wall paintings all over the church. So the Royal Commission in December 1984, as part of the emergency recording programme, went down to Llandeilo Tal-y-bont Church, and led by my former and esteemed colleague, Tony Parkinson, recorded as much of the wall paintings as was practically possible. The church seemed doomed, but another mini miracle, really. The National Museum, in a really sort of far-sighted visionary decision, decided to dismantle the church, get the relevant permissions, and re-erect it in St. Fagans and reconstruct the wall paintings. So this reconstruction drawing by Jane Durrant, shows the wall paintings that were uncovered by the Commission and other teams. So you can see it's very busy. It's in fact covered with wall paintings throughout the church. So you entered the church and were immediately confronted as a canonist by St. Christopher. There are wall paintings along the arcade, and then at the east end of the aisle, there are two special paintings flanking the altar, and then in the nave there are further paintings relating to the Passion. So I'm going to just have a look at some of these paintings. I should emphasize that Llandeilo Tal-y-bont is so important because it's very easy to look in terms at wall paintings in terms of these big set piece paintings, but in fact almost every inch of the church at Llandeilo Tal-y-bont was painted with ornament and figurative painting. So this is the face. It's a face, a sort of serene face, which emerged on the left-hand side of the altar at the east end of the aisle. At first, it was thought that it was a painting of the Virgin Mary, but as more of it was uncovered, it became apparent that it wasn't the Virgin Mary. It was, in fact, St. Catherine. And there you see the instruments of her martyrdom, including the bladed wheel and the sword. On the other side of the altar, there was a painting of the bound Christ, and here Christ is sitting with his hands bound and his feet bound, and with the instruments of the Passion, and a skull at his feet, rather like a football, which is meant to remind people of Golgotha, the place of the skull. And then above the painting, there are the words that Ecce homo, behold the man, the words spoken by Pilate when he presented Christ to the crowd. In the nave, there are further paintings relating to the Passion. They begin really with this angel holding up a shield with the three nails used in the crucifixion and standing on a floor of checkerwork. And throughout the church, you get checkerwork and all sorts of theme and variation. And then above this painting of the angel in the window reveal, there is this painting of the mocking of Christ. And here is Christ looking straight at the viewer with a sort of serene but challenging expression. And then to the left and right, seen in profile only are the mockers, and they've been given a sort of knobbly noses and so on to suggest their moral imperfections. And the whole thing is just beautifully drawn. And I particularly like the way the spit is drawn, which is rather like the ends of a flagellum or scourge, just brilliantly done. So that's that corner where the mocking of Christ is. And then if you just move to the right, there's another painting. You can see the conservators working on it, and it's quite difficult to see, but you have quite a sandwich here. You've got a geometric border, a stemmed rose with rays, which may or may not be symbolic, and then the framework of the throne, and then a halo and the face, presumably of Christ, although this is sometimes disputed, and then Christ's hand is raised in blessing. And then a bit further on in the chancel arch, there's a painting which is very difficult to see, of a bishop, perhaps St. Tylo, perhaps St. Thomas of Becket, and it's been kind of obliterated with pick marks. Now, this may be iconoclasm, although I don't think so. I think it's just a key for later plaster. But it kind of makes the point, really, that in the 1540s, these paintings were just obliterated, painted over with a coat of whitewash, which lasted, from the 1540s until the 1980s. Now, St. Tylo's has been re-erected very successfully at St. Fagans, and you just have to, admire the just the foresight of Gerard Nash and others who organised it. The interior has been reconstructed, and I have to say that the interior is brilliant. It's covered in versions of the paintings that were found in the medieval church. They're not the real paintings, as some people imagine. They're copies, versions, and they coexist with other paintings which are likely to have existed there, but for which there was no evidence, including the doom over the rood screen. And people's reactions are mixed. Some people like it, some people hate it, and I've heard someone describe it as absolutely horrible. But that's the sort of medieval church for you. I think the important thing about the re-erected church at Llandeilo Tal-y-bont is that it gives you the impression of what the medieval painted interior was actually like, and how almost every inch of the walls was painted. And the paint really is like a kind of skin or wallpaper which surrounded the worshippers. The importance of the discoveries at Llandeilo Tal-y-bont and the opening of the restored church in 2007 was that it raised consciousness about the importance of wall paintings. And almost exactly as Llandeilo Tal-y-bont the interior was being recreated, an important red line was found inside this church. This is St. Cadoc's Llancarfan, again in Glamorgan, in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's it's a very good and substantial church with the west tower nave and facing us the aisle and the porch. And the aisle is sort of punctured by these very large windows which allow light to flood into the aisle and which illuminate the interior and especially the wall paintings. So that's the interior of the church at Llancarfan. And here we're looking down the aisle, and we can see the screen, and beyond that a chapel called the Raglan Chapel. And the whole thing is covered by a wagon roof, a roof of closely spaced oak trusses, which really was the most expensive type of church roof that money could buy. And there's some nice little ornaments in the roof, including this angel holding a shield, which must have been painted and which would have had, I think, the arms of one of the gentry families who contributed towards the rebuilding of the aisle. Now, the west end of the aisle is covered in wall painting. It's the most important collection of wall paintings that really has come to light for, well, I don't know, half a century, maybe a century. The red line that was discovered is the line that runs just under the wall painting. Just under the wall plate and above the wall paintings. And here on the south wall, we can see a whole series of wall paintings. So moving from sort of bottom left, there's perhaps the earliest painting, Death and the Gallant, which I'll go on to describe. And then the central section is the most enormous and the most complete depiction of St. George and the Dragon that exists in England and Wales. And then to the right, there's a wonderful depiction of the 7 deadly sins, and then round the corner, which you can't see, are the sort of complementary 7 works of mercy. Now, we'll just have a little look at some of these paintings in more detail. So this is the painting, Death and the Gallant, and the Gallant is there on the left. He's dressed in the height of fashion, I suppose the height of late 15th century fashion. He wears a nice striped jerkin. He wears tight hose or stockings, which show off the shape of his legs. He wears, there we are. He wears a nice fashionable woolen cap, perhaps a Monmouth cap, and under it you can see his sort of black hair. He's got a long sword, which makes him look actually faintly ridiculous. He is completely self-absorbed. He doesn't worry about the future, and certainly he doesn't worry about death. But death is lurking around the corner, kind of literally so in this case. Death is painted on the window reveal at the right of the painting. And there's death. And death is a sort of hideous, grinning cadaver wrapped in a shroud. You can see the sort of knot of the shroud at the top of his head. And although you can't really see it, ghastly worms are sort of threading through the remains of his body. And death, and I hope you can see this, death has grasped the arm of the gallant, and he's about to lead the gallant on a new and unexpected journey from which he won't return. So, very important painting, and probably late-ish 15th century. Moving on to the painting of St. George, which would have been visible to everyone leaving the church, and is a kind of morality of good conquering evil. It's an extraordinary painting, full of energy, full of detail. Jane Rutherford, who's been conserving these paintings, wonderfully told me that she couldn't find much trace of underdrawing. So it seems that the painter, who must have been a master, just probably did an outline and just painted it directly on the wall. It's very painterly. I like this detail here. I like the way in which the horse is looking at the dragon eyeball to eyeball. And I'll just go back. I like the energy of the painting, and the painter isn't really constrained by the framing of the frame drawn around the painting, and at odd points the painting just breaks out of the frame. All the accoutrements, if you can call it that, of the story are there. So to the left of George and the dragon, there's the princess and the lamb, who were, of course, bait for the dragon. And the castle, or the wall town, with the king and queen looking out to see what's going to happen to the princess. And remarkably, I think, in one of the towers of the castle, there's a dungeon and a face looking out. And like so many late medieval paintings, there are details designed to hook your interest and make you contemplate these paintings. And then on the right of George and the dragon, there's a drawing of the Virgin Mary blessing the scene, and you can see more of those stenciled roses that we saw at Newton Nottage, which at Newton Nottage date from the early 16th century. And then above the Virgin Mary, there's the shield, the painted shield, 3 swans of the local gentry family, the Bordrips, who must have contributed or to the painting or commissioned it. Moving to the right of St. George and the Dragon, you can see a depiction of the 7 deadly sins, and it's a wonderful painting, full of detail, full of humour, and all the deadly sins are linked by the sort of fiery breath of a many-headed hellish dragon which lurks at the bottom of the picture. So at the upper level, you have pride flanked by despair and anger, and pride is depicted rather, rather subversively in a way, as a king, as a completely self-absorbed king, looking at, just admiring his sword, and being flattered by two devils arranging his crown while he neglects his duties. On the left, there's despair, and that's depicted by a bearded man, again with a Monmouth cap, committing suicide by plunging a sword through his middle, and he's being assisted by a little devil with a pronged fork. And then on the right, there's anger, and that's a depiction of two boys fighting with sword and buckler and being embraced by an enormous grinning devil. And then at the bottom, there's lust, luxuria. They all have Latin tags, and they're, characteristically, you have an embracing couple and two leering devils look on. And then moving round to the East End, you have depictions of avarice and of sloth. And here's avarice at the top, and avarice is counting his money while two devils are pouring more coins into a tray which is being heated up by the fiery breath of one of the heads of the hellish dragon. And then below there's sloth, and sloth is depicted as just too tired to get up, even though a priest is ringing the bell on the left, telling everyone that it's time for mass. Now, in the window reveal and lit by the window is just an absolutely splendid, very large depiction of greed. And here we see greed shown as a gross man bursting out of his clothes, lolling in a chair, and guzzling wine from a bowl which is being proffered by an eager devil. And then at his feet, there's some interesting depictions, quite unusual, of wine bottles or flasks wrapped in protective straw casing. I think I'll end there, except to note that the 7 deadly sins are faced by the 7 good works, which are still in the process of conservation. I'll draw to a close now, but I just want to make a couple of points. I hope I've been able to convince you of the interest, the mystery really, and sometimes the beauty of wall paintings and their rarity, and just encourage you, if you come across a wall painting, to make a record of it, because it won't be there the next time you look. But wall paintings do come to light all the time. This is the latest one that I've heard about, discovered earlier this year in a house on Anglesey, not far from Beaumaris, and I haven't been able to get there because of visiting restrictions. But it shows a post-war partition, rather like the one we saw at Kiliai. It's a Deus End partition, and it shows a fragment of a painted tapestry, really, and with bunches of grapes at the top, and the date 15. The rest of the date is on another post, which may or may not exist, so a 16th century post. So that seems to be an important painting, which it would be wonderful to see in due course. The second thing is, as Angharad has already mentioned, we are preparing a book on wall paintings. Like all commissioned books, it's a collaborative work. The text is written, it's being translated, being laid out by the best possible people. We're sort of trying to corral all the illustrations at the moment, and with luck, it'll be ready sometime in the early summer. So that's something to watch out for and something to spend your Christmas book tokens on. So the Christmas lecture isn't complete without some sales talk, but I've left it to the end. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Angharad.
Diolch yn fawr iawn wir, Richard, am sgwrs arall hynod o ddiddorol heno. So diolch yn fawr iawn i chi, Richard, am hwnna. I hope you also will enjoy the talk as well. So normally you'd have a time to catch your breath for a minute, Richard, while listening to the applause. Unfortunately, we can't hear them tonight. But just to give you a minute then for questions to be submitted as well, we're having one or two coming through. You already mentioned the forthcoming book, which you can see there, the draft book cover that Richard is sharing there. A dwi'n balch o ddweud fydd y llyfr yma ar gael yn mewn ychydig fisoedd gobeithio yn ystod yr haf, felly cofiwch gadw llygad ar ein gwefan, neu cyfryngau cymdeithasol hefyd am fanylion pellach. For further announcements regarding our newest publications and for other news about the work of the Commission, please do subscribe to our blog or join our Friends Network. If you join the Friends Network, you'll receive invitations to our events and even get a discount on our books, especially the new one as well. So it's worth joining, and it's free to join, I should say, as well. Full details are available on our website, and you're welcome to contact us for further information. I think, Richard, you've got a slide with all the contact details on, haven't you, on the next one, so we can have a look, at those. Yeah. Well, thank you. We do have some questions that have come through. The first one, Richard, is from Jill. Whilst we were talking about Llandeilo Tal-y-bont Church, she was asking, did the borders around the paintings have any significance of their own?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yes, they're borders which do frame the painting, and I think that we have to imagine the church is filled with quite a lot of set-piece paintings, and people formed a special connection with the saint or the incident, like Christ being mocked, and it was there as a focus for devotion. So the border actually framed the painting, but you know, I do want to emphasize really that these paintings weren't thought of really as kind of separate, you know, art objects like we might think of them. The whole church was covered in paintings, and these little frames just marked out areas where people which might form a focus for special devotion.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Richard. Gobeithio bod yna'n ateb eich cwestiwn chi, Jill. Hope that answers your question. We have another question as well. This one's from Marilyn. She's asking, well, she's saying, first of all, Richard, thanks for your talk. Is there a database where all known Welsh wall paintings are gathered together?
There isn't as yet. A lot of them are noted on Corfline, but I think when this book is available, there will in fact be at the end a sort of gazetteer of every church wall painting, both pre and post-Reformation, and it'll contain a link to Corfline and also details of further sources. But no, you know, databases of wall paintings, you know, have been sadly lacking, and there are separate databases for painted glass, and at last we will have a database for wall paintings.
Diolch, Richard. Hope that answers your question, Madeline, and a good reason to buy the book. There's quite a few questions coming in. The next one's from Caroline. She's asking, were there any regional variations in wall paintings in houses in Wales? So different styles from north, south, east, west, or by the old counties, for instance?
Yeah, that's quite a difficult question, actually. There are kind of broad variations. I mentioned the Sunday Christ, and that's just found really in South Wales and southern England, not in North Wales and northern England. But by and large, you do get the same themes repeated in different churches, and the painters themselves were peripatetic, often based in the towns, based in, say, in Shrewsbury, maybe in Prestine, Hereford, Bristol, and in some of the Welsh towns. And these painters will go to every part of England and Wales, and their style would carry sort of, would be carried far and wide beyond any particular region. So, no, you can't really detect any broad differences, regional differences in wall painting, certainly medieval wall paintings, unlike the differences you get in the carpentry of houses, for example. So, no.
Diolch, Richard. Another question, this one from Ivor. Years ago, he saw newspaper used as wallpaper in the servants' quarter of a small mansion near Gaernarfon. Was this simple lining paper? Was it used as lining paper, or would it be other use for it?
Yes, I have seen that myself, and it's difficult to know what's happening. I mean, sometimes it's you're actually papering over some decaying plaster. And sometimes the newspaper might conceivably be, be reporting a historic event or an interesting event. You do get printed material stuck on walls, and a famous example of the ballads that I have seen, fragmentary, pasted on post and panel partitions in upland farmhouses. And these date from the early 19th century. Yes, it may have had significance, and certainly printed material was stuck on walls and stuck on partitions in the 19th century.
Diolch. Question nesaf again, Philip. Could X-rays reveal possible paintings under the whitewash?
That's again that is quite a difficult question. I wish that it was so. I don't think it's been tried, and it's it's a good idea, and yes, I'll make inquiries to see if it has been used. I think the great, it's so difficult to know. You get sandwiches of wall paintings, and it's so difficult to know, as at Llangar, what lies under the most visible paintings. And in the past, it's no longer true, really. Conservators destroyed later wall paintings to get at the earlier ones. So if there was a technique for actually visualizing hidden wall paintings, that would be fantastic.
Diolch. I think that's the last of the questions we've received at the moment. Mae croeso chi yrru unrhyw gwestiynau pellach atom ar ôl heno hefyd. There's also some few comments here. Richard is saying thank you very much to you for a very interesting talk, and wishing everybody a safe and happy Christmas, etc. So we'll share those with you afterwards as well. And somebody's also saying, yes, that I'll just answer this one about the lecture has been recorded tonight, and it will be available for you to watch again. You can watch it on YouTube, the Royal Commission's YouTube channel, and it will also be on Facebook as well. So if you're on Facebook, you can go and listen back again to some of those. All right, okay. So I've had another one. Oh, there's a question that's come up on Facebook here. Richard, if you've got to take this one as our last question. Would the master painters have travelled throughout England, Scotland and Wales? And has anyone been able to identify individual painters from the styles, different styles of painting?
Yeah. Yes, certainly painters did travel. They were based in towns, and then the Tudor tax records, they're actually identified by name. So especially along the Welsh March in the Welsh towns and in the English towns, you had painters. They travelled. There was a painting season which extended from spring through the summer to autumn. We haven't been able to identify the styles of individual painters in Wales, but in East Anglia, there has been some success in identifying works by associated with individual painters who haven't been named. I think the whole point is that painters were peripatetic. They did travel, and so the same style of painting may be found widely scattered. Unfortunately, they didn't sign their paintings, and they're forever anonymous except in the tax records.
Well, at least there's a record of them, which is good then. So diolch yn fawr iawn, Richard, am ateb y cwestiynau hefyd. Fel dwi'n dweud, mae croeso chi unrhyw cwestiynau bellach atom ar ôl heno. If we haven't been able to answer your question tonight, please do send them in, add them to the comment on Facebook for us or email us. We'd be more than happy to send you the answers after the lecture tonight. Ar hyn o bryd, ni wrth yn datblygu'n rhaglen o ddigwyddiadau ar-lein, a byddwn ni'n diolchgar iawn i chi pe byddai modd i chi gwblhau'r ffurflen werthuso yr ydych chi derbyn naill ai drwy e-bost, neu sy'ch chi'n edrych ar Facebook, mae'n diddolen yno hefyd i'r ffurflen. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi ymlaen llaw am eich cymorth gyda hynny. As we're developing our online programme of events, we would appreciate if you could take a minute to complete the evaluation form either sent to you via email, or if you could please use the link in the comment on Facebook. Thank you very much, we'd appreciate that. The next Royal Commission event will be our Digital Past Conference, which will be on new technologies in heritage, interpretation and outreach. And that will be held on Wednesday, the 10th of February 2021. And for the first time, it will be a free online conference with various workshops during the week. So please do have a look on our website for full details and to register as well. Gobeithio'n fawr byddwch chi'n gallu ymuno ni ar gyfer cynhadledd gorffennol digidol a'r gweithdai amrywiol yno yn mis Chwefror. Ond cyn hynny, os ydych chi am gael rhywbeth arall i wneud yr wythnos nesaf, mae'r Llyfrgell Genedlaethol gyda i'w digwyddiad nhw ymlaen am 4:05 ar nos Fawrth yr 8fed o Ragfyr, edrych ar planed yn 50. If you can't wait until February to the Royal Commission's next event, the National Library's next event will be held next Tuesday, the 8th of December at 5:30, Planet at 50. So that's a conversation then to celebrate since the 50 years since the magazine was established. Felly ar hynny i gloi, hoffwn ni diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd am ymuno ni heno. Diolch yn fawr iawn i ni a Dafydd o'r Llyfrgell Genedlaethol a hefyd y staff yn y Comisiwn sydd wedi bod wrthi'n brysur yn trefnu heno. Ac yn olaf, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi, Richard, am sgwrs diddorol iawn. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you to Nia David from the National Library and the Commission staff who have been involved with arrangements for this evening's talk. And of course, a big thank you to Richard for another fascinating talk. Fi ar hynny, nos da i chi a Nadolig llawen i chi. Good evening, everyone. Diolch.
Nadolig llawen.